Hey, everybody. Just got back. Are you ready for part two of what is ICM photography? If you have no idea what that is, you need to watch part one, which was last week. For the ones that are all caught up, are you ready for part two? Let's do it. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to my channel. And this is part two of what is ICM photography. And again, just a quick note, if you have not watched part one, I recommend you watch part one before you watch part two. The links are in the show notes at the bottom. So get back to part one. And when you're done with that, come on over to part two. Now, part two, I'm going to actually work on a couple images. I learned a lot, by the way, going out and shooting at a metro park here in Michigan. And I made some mistakes. And that's how we learn, right? Is by getting a camera out, going out, shooting, and making mistakes. So before we get into that, I'm going to pick a single image. Actually, I'm going to do two projects. And I'm doing this on the fly. I'm just my very first attempt at this. And so there's going to be some mistakes, me working in Photoshop, because a lot of this is going to be trial and error. But before I do that, if you could do me a favor, and that is, if you're new to the channel, please like this, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. That way, the next time I upload a video, you'll get notified on that. All right, with that out of the way, let's get into part two here. And that is, I'll work on two projects. And my first attempt is going to work on a single image in Photoshop. And so when I bring this into Photoshop, one of the things I'm going to do is I'm going to work in layers. Now, I'm going to do some basic things in layers. I'm not going to do any high-end stuff. I'll probably use blending modes on this, and this is going to be very subjective. It's just based on what I'm, looking at visually, if I like it or not. I'm going to change it, on the fly. Could use textures. That's an option. Or you can add digital noise or whatever to create some, abstract type looks, and possibly even working in masking. So those are some things to think about when you pull your image in that you shot. And just as a recap, with the camera, the technique I used was I was hand holding it, and I had to use an ND filter, a variable one, because it was a bright day, and I made a mistake that I'll talk about a little bit later. But I actually grabbed the wrong lens, and I can only step down to, I believe it was f14 or 16, and I really want to push it to f22. So I should have brought my other lens, but I did not do that. So that was a rookie mistake. But again, we learn by trial and error. But anyhow, the techniques, just a quick review, was I was going up and down at anywhere from a second to 3 or 4 seconds. I was going up and down like that. Sometimes I went left to right, and other times I went in a circular motion like that. So let's take a look at the images. Let me put my camera aside here. And let's get into Photoshop. So what I'm going to do, we don't need the PowerPoint anymore. And I'm using the bridge and to navigate and look at the images. And I did JPEG and RAW files, but I found that the more research I did on ICM, JPEGs are really good images to work with, especially if you could shoot it at the lowest possible resolution, because you're really looking for abstract and grain and that kind of stuff, maybe digital noise that adds to the effect. And, wow, what was that? Hang on a second. That was one of my last images there. I like that. But I found that, let's see, I was taking some shots of some sailboats. Some are clear, some are blurred. Don't really like any of these. Anyhow, I was scanning through the images to see which I would work with. And I actually went to a farm that was at the park. And unfortunately, I couldn't get anything good with animals because they were all locked in a really tight area, and I couldn't get back far enough. They would have been better if it was a really nice landscape type, field with animals, cows or something in the background. And this was just too close. Also learned that should avoid a big bright sky. If it was dark and cloudy, I think it could add to the effect. But Anyhow, I mean, that's how you learn, right? So let's take a look at, I was looking at this image before, but I didn't do anything with it, but I did a circular motion with the camera on this. So let me open this up by just double clicking on it in the bridge, and that should push that right into Photoshop. Let me push down the size of this a little bit. And because, again, very abstract looking right now, but a lot of white areas there, and I'm trying to use pretty much, without adding like a sky or something like that to this. I want to use the original image as much as possible. So I'm going to crop the image. So I'm going to grab my crop tool, and it doesn't matter what aspect ratio. This is your preference, but it's set to like doing a 5:4 aspect ratio, which is great for like an 8:10 print. But again, I'm just going to have to pull this down. I wish I would have shot it differently, where I didn't have all that much sky there. But let's say we'll pull that about right there. We'll see how that looks. And again, very subjective on this. We'll accept that. And again, let me just bring that up a little bit. Sort of like these swirls that are in there. That must have came from reflections on these little paddle boats and stuff. I'm going to duplicate the layer, because one of the first things I like to do is add a little bit more punch to this. So I'm going to go to the blending options and see what multiply gives me. Color burn looks interesting. I'm just sort of scrolling through these. Overlay, soft light, hard light. I like maybe color burn, push that down. Maybe multiply. Let's push that to 100%. Yeah, maybe, and again, very subjective, right? So I'm just going to go 100% on that. In fact, what I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate the layer. And again, I'm just shooting from the hip here. And I'm going to throw in a screen blending mode, because I know that's going to lighten that up. And what I'm going to do is hide what I just did by adding a layer mask there. But I'm going to hold the Alt key down, Option on a Mac, when I click here to add the layer. And that just makes it black, so it's hiding everything I did. And I'm going to grab my paintbrush, and I am at, 30% looks good. Maybe make that a little bit bigger. And I got to paint with white, so I got to change my chip colors there to make sure I'm painting back in white. And let's, I'm just going to add some lightness in certain areas. And again, very subjective. You can see what it's doing here in the mask. Remember the rule. White reveals, black conceals. So white is revealing the layer below, which is the one that's set to multiply. So I'm just bringing in some lightning. Oops, let's go back to that again. X on the keyboard. Make sure I'm painting back in white. Oops, there's a mistake. Rookie mistake. I'm actually painting on the image. Sorry about that, people. I need to be back on the mask. So there you go. Error. Okay, so there's so I started with the original image, and there we go. And you might add grain or texture to this. Again, I'm just shooting from the hip, but my goal here was to select a single image to work with, and see if I can do something creative. And by the way, just why not? Let's go to like curves. And I'll add what's called an S curve. That adds a little bit more contrast to this. And again, personal preference. And maybe it's a little bit too much. We'll tone that down a bit. It just adds a little bit more punch to that. And let me do a hue and saturation. And let's, we could bump up that saturation. Ooh, that looks pretty cool. And let's shift the colors around with the hue. We don't have to keep those same colors. Again, personal preference on that. Yeah, I sort of like that. So I went from that as my starting point to that right there. So that is my first attempt at ICM, and that's the intentional movement of the camera. I'm sorry, intentional camera movement, ICM. There we go. So let's do another one, but this one I'm going to approach a little bit different. And let's see what I can come up with. Okay, let's get back into the bridge. And with this one, I'm going to work with two images. and try to do something a little bit more creative. And I was looking at this image here, which is really blurred. That was at an f-stop of 16. And that's when I wish I could have, shot throughout the day at f22, but wasn't able to. So that's just that's the way it goes. And this was like about 1.6 seconds long. And I believe on this one I was doing a left to right type movement. And then this one is pretty clear. The exposures are not that great, but that could be a change. And again, this is abstract. So I'm going to hold the control key down to select these two images in the bridge. And if I go to Tools drop-down menu and come down here where it says Photoshop on the flyout menu, I'll choose Load Files into Photoshop Layers. And it'll take those two images and stack them on top of each other in Photoshop. And for some reason, I lost my... There we go. I'll pull this over. It went to my other monitor for some reason. So let's get this centered right there. In fact, let's make that a little bit smaller. And you can see that one image is on top of the other right here. And again, I'm just shooting from the hip. This is the first time I'm doing this, so a lot of experimental. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this one and put it on top, but I'm going to temporarily turn that off. And the blurred one, I'm going to duplicate that layer. And let me try some blending modes here, see what I like the best. See if anything's good, we'll see. And again, too much brightness in my opinion, but multiply. Well, I'm going to go with multiply again. I'm going to pull my opacity down a bit. So we're getting a very soft look. And again, I might change my mind and do a change on that. But you can see that the fisherman or the guy in the boat right here, I don't know if that shows up or not, is very blurred, but he's sharp over there and stands out. So I'm going to, let's pull the opacity down on this. And the reason I'm pulling the opacity down on this, I need to line this up. So I'm going to grab my move tool, click and drag. I'm just eyeballing this as I'm moving that layer to line them up right there. And I'll talk about this a little bit later, but this is something I learned, and I didn't thought I would need one. But to do something like this when you're doing two images, it's best to be on a tripod. And if I would have taken the shot, then the next one, blurred it, take the shot. Basically, he's going to be, the guy in the boat's going to be in the same spot. Now I got to just manually sort of guess at where he should be by lining it up like that with dropping the opacity down. I'll push the opacity back to 100% right there. And let's try a blending mode. Let's see what I can get going here. Whiten or I'm going to go with screen. Screens looks pretty cool. Now what I'm going to do is pull the opacity down on this. And obviously we see lines here on the side because again these perfectly don't match. So I'm going to grab the crop tool. And I'll leave the same aspect ratio there. We'll pull that in. Now, I don't know. Well, let's do this. I'm going to pull it up a little bit more. We'll just position them about right. I don't know if I like him there or there. I'm going to leave him right there. Let's just, again, experimenting. We'll accept that. So that'll be like my, composition, the layout and stuff like that. And then this, I'm just going to, if I push this up. Okay, I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull that down a little bit in the blending mode. Make this a little bit bigger so we can see this. And I don't know if I want that as 100% or pull it back down. Now let's, for right now I'm going to leave it 100%. And I'm going to add a mask, but I'm going to hold the Alt key down again, Option on the Mac. And when I click here to add a mask, it'll block it out. by filling it with black. And remember, white reveals and black is concealing the information on the layer there. Grab my paintbrush, and I'm still at 30%. And I'm just going to make sure I'm painting with white and just stroke in that area a bit to bring him out. And again, that's too much. And if I pull the opacity down, let's go on the image, pull that down a bit. Just so we can tell that something is there. And on the mask, I'm going to feather the mask out. Maybe something like that. Okay, not perfect, but again, ideally, I should have had that on a tripod. So I'm just sort of, again, playing with this. And then if I want to punch this up in that, I'm going to do visible stamp layer. And if you guys watch some of my past videos, I talk about what a visible stamp layer is as a concept. And basically, it's taking all these layers, consolidating it, and putting it on a new layer. I don't want to flatten everything down because in case I don't like what I got, I don't want to start all over and stuff. I want to keep my history of information there. So if I change my mind tomorrow, whatever, that data and stuff in the Photoshop file is still there. So Shift Control Alt E, like an Edward on my keyboard. That would be, Shift Command Option E on a Mac. And there's my visible stamp layer at the very top. And I could play with this a little bit by maybe pulling in, multiply is not doing nothing for me. Screen. Again, very subjective on this stuff. I don't know if I want that fully. I'll go with soft light. And maybe I'll pull that down a bit in my opacity here. So I'm at about 55% opacity. And a little bit too much of the green there. So again, maybe I'll come up here and do a hue and saturation. I wonder what that looks like in black and white, just for the heck of it. That looks pretty cool. I probably would add some contrast to that. But let's see what happens if I punch up the color. And again, this is very abstract. That's what it's supposed to be. And, ooh, something in the blues almost. Well, again, personal preference on this, right? And maybe pull down that, no. Ooh. I'm sort of liking that. Let's see if I play with the lightness slider here. Sort of wash that out a little bit. All right, so this is, well, we started with multiple layers here, but yeah, so there's an example of working with two different images and playing around with blending, masking, adding some hue and saturation. So that is my second attempt at ICM photography. And I had to write down some stuff as to what I learned about ICM. So here we go. Ready? So number one is I was shooting in manual mode, and that's what I heard from the instructors. And you can get by with that, but I think it would have been much easier had I worked in aperture priority mode. And here's why. Let me grab my camera. You're not gonna be able to per se see this, but I have a neutral density filter on here, and by me, this goes from, I got to remember this. Let's see. It says 1 density filters, 1.3 stops to 8 stops. So if I got my ISO set to a certain value, and it's, again, I want to have a long shutter speed. So I push down the f-stop as far as it could go, close-wise. And then I could actually use, I don't know if that's going to show up, but this thing slides back and forth from 1.3 to 8. And in other words, as I'm moving this around the neutral density filter, I can look at my shutter speed through the viewfinder to say, oh, it's only at a half a second. I want to push this, and now it's a full second. Now it's a second and a half. Now it's 2 seconds. But the point is, because it's aperture priority, the exposure is going to be perfect all the time. So that was a lesson I learned that I should have a shot in aperture priority rather than the manual mode. That way I would be guaranteed that everything would have been exposed all the time and it'd be faster for shooting. The other thing is if I'm going to use 2 images like I showed you on the last project, I learned and discovered that that should be on a tripod, dude. I mean, come on, you're ballparking it, you're moving around like this. It'd have been nicer to have the guy in the boat pretty much, in the same spot because again, was on, and he wasn't moving. He was just, I'm sure he's just drifting or something slowly, but I could have taken the shot and then, adjusted things and take the shot again and blurred it. But it would have been much easier to line up if that was on a tripod, and I'd be able to use more of the image and the composite. The other thing is number 3 is practice, practice, practice. This is my first attempt, and it seemed like it was going to be pretty easy, but it really wasn't. After I came back and I looked at stuff and I go, this is, do I have anything really to work with here? And I got lucky on some stuff, but in my opinion, it's not the greatest. I'm sure I could do a lot better. And so after I've been watching other videos out there on different techniques and doing ICM, I'm going, well, at least I learned. Again, that's how we do it, right? Trial and error, make mistakes. And the 4th thing that I learned is that I suck at this. But I'm going to be very honest with you. I'm really fascinated with this, and I'm going to keep doing this because, again, a lot of the experts out there says it's going to take you 75 to 100 attempts to get something that's workable and usable, that's worthy of printing. And that makes so much sense now because after I went out and shot a bunch of stuff, I'm going, to me, this is not worthy of a print. I'm sure I can do something better as I compare this with, other people's work out there. But, hey, but I would like to try this with street photography. I think that'd be pretty cool, and some traffic, and see what I can do. And then maybe focus on working in black and white. I think that would be pretty interesting. But anyhow, hopefully this all makes sense to you. Again, very subjective. You're the artist. There's no right or wrong as you're working in Photoshop, duplicating, the layers, playing with blending modes and masking, and maybe throw a texture overlay on that or something and sort of play with that. In fact, you know what? Let's go back to this. I'm going to grab this one. I've got a texture here. Just what the heck? And it's probably really big. It is. That's a low-res image, JPEG. Okay, since I did the word overlay texture, we're going to do it right here. And again, just playing with blending mode. So let me just pull down, darken, multiply. There we go. Lighten. That's not doing nothing for me, but overlay, that's pretty cool. And again, you could pull the opacity down in this if you wanted to. So that adds a little bit different. And again, there's some color in this overlay. If I didn't want that, I believe Shift Control U just converted that to black and white. That would be Shift Command U in a Mac. And now it's a black and white texture. And it's just adding some grain to that. That's a little bit too much grain. So I'll just maybe pull that down a bit. And pull that opacity down. Let's see, before, after, before, after. So there you go. Play with different textures. You have different color textures, multicolor textures. You could add to your projects right there. Okay, so hopefully you guys learned something. Again, my information, if you have any questions, my email is right here on the screen. And always like I do before, and that is, hey guys and gals, let's do me a favor. If you like this, please like the video. Please like it, because it helps the algorithm to push this out to other people to find us if they're looking for something with Photoshop or working with photography. So once again, please like the video, subscribe if you have not subscribed, and hit that notification bell. And with that out of the way, you know how I end this all the time, people, and that is get that camera out like I just did. Recorded these 2 videos in one day, did part 1 in the morning, and then ran out to the park and took some shots, came back and did part 2. So went out, shot, made a lot of mistakes. Literally just keep thinking out of the box. Until next time, see ya.